Hi everyone, welcome to lecture 5, and today we're going to be focused on workplace stress and including the effects of workload and control. Now what we mean by workload is basically how much somebody has to do. So let's look at teachers, for example. They have to plan lessons, they have to deliver the lessons, they have to take books in to mark, they have to give accurate feedback, they have to go to meetings, they have to do each parents reports, all those kind of stuff. Yeah, so workload is how much you have to do, and work control is basically your flexibility in for example, picking your own deadlines. We can have things like flexi work, so flexi time, where you agree to do a certain amount of hours, but then if you are down a couple of hours, for example, it's your choice or your initiative to make up those hours. So I know a few workplaces have flexi time, but for example, some people don't have any type of control at all. Their one is you have a certain deadline and it needs to be done by 5 o'clock on Friday. No give, no take. Yeah, so imagine you have like 200 things to do. That is going to be quite stressful. So some people actually don't have any control in things like deadlines or in terms of what they need to do. Okay, so we're going to be looking at those. Okay, so just a quick definition of workplace stress or workplace stresses are any aspects of the working environment that may perceive as stressful. So it may not just be like workload or control. It could be anything. It could be like your social interactions. For example, I know some workplaces, not everybody's going to get on, not everyone's going to speak. There could be some emails being sent left, right, and center about certain people or the way they do their work, and yet the whole environment sometimes can be a stressful place to be in. So that's why psychologists are so interested in seeing how these workplace stresses can affect our health. And we know what happens when we have a lot of these stress hormones in our system. It can affect our white blood cells and our immune system, and therefore can make us ill. And that is a problem. If we take off a lot of time off work due to stress, employers are going to be missing out on a huge amount of money because they actually have to pay for stress leave, and all the sorts of stuff. So it could be a big problem with employers. And even if you have so many people off for stress, it means that productivity is not going to be so good either, because it means that because that person's off, people are not going to be there to do the work that needs to be done. Hence, the company suffers as well. Think about teachers as well. The amount of teachers you may have had who may have just been like taking days off sick. They may have taken days off sick because of the amount of workload or control that they may have had. So if you don't have no teachers, it affects you in terms of your learning. So it is a big issue in society, hence why psychologists are so interested in how people perceive these particular stresses. Right, so, ooh, it's a bit off scale here. Right, so this is our first key study, and I've picked Marma Patel for my study bank, 1997, and they were really looking at the relationship between job workload, again, how much somebody has to do, and the control somebody has in relation to how ill that they get. And they initially thought that high grade employees, so those are people who are higher up in a rank, so it could be like the head teachers, the senior leadership teams, all those kind of people, for example. It depends which type of job you're looking at. They believe that they're going to have the most high workload to do, the most high in terms of workload. And low grade employees, so teachers, for example, are going to have the most low control. So that's what they initially thought. And what they done it in London as in a naturalistic environment. So they went to different types of environments where civil servants work. And civil servants just basically mean people who work for the government, who does government jobs, like teachers, for example, are civil servants. Police officers are civil servants because they work for the government, so the government pays them. And they've done it quite a large scale of people, 7,372, but just saying over 7,000 will be fine, honestly. What they did find is that the amount of work that you had to do didn't really correlate with illness. So it doesn't mean that you have over 300 things to do. That wouldn't correspond to the amount of illness. What they did find that if you had low levels of job control, that is not given the flexibility to determine when you get things in, how you do certain things, people were more likely, so these civil servants were more likely to develop heart disease. Okay, and they realized it didn't actually depend on the grade. So whether you're high grade or low grade, if you didn't have any type of job control, or you have very low job control, you're most likely to get this kind of heart disease. So we have a conclusion, therefore, that we need to start giving people, i.e., teachers, hey, we need to start giving workers, especially, a bit more control in terms of their working environment, how they do it, what they do. For example, some people may like to work from home, some people may like to work online. So a bit more control can minimize the extent at people in terms of developing heart disease. Okay, so we have our list of limitations. That is our criticism. So population validity. Again, I'm sticking to this particular theme. So they use civil servant workers. There are other types of workers who don't work for the government. There's private organisations. Do they get affected in the same way? And another one, it was in London as well. Obviously, we know that the whole world does not revolve around London. And then obviously, we have the use of questionnaires as well. Okay, so that is key study 1, and a key study 2 that should say key study 2. Um, Okay, now it's all changed to key study 2. So I've decided to use Johansson et al. And they looked at the relationship between job workload, that is how much work somebody had to do, and illness. They've done it in Sweden for sawmill workers. And basically what they did find that um, the sawyers, those who, for example, had a repetitive task, and if they don't get their task done, then the company doesn't move forward. So they had a really, really huge responsibility, basically. But a task, as we know, doing the same thing over and over again gets quite boring. Yeah. And what they've done, they compared them to like the maintenance workers, the people who, for example, they fix the machines that they're working on, and they call these people the low risk groups. And they had a bit more flexibility in terms of each job wasn't the same. I can't think of anything worse than having to do exactly the same thing day in, day out. So they maybe fix a different problem each day or something, and sometimes there were no problems, so they get to pick it back for a bit. Yeah, so they compared those two types of workers, and they found that those sawyers, who they call them the high risk group, they had higher illness rates, and they had high levels of adrenaline in their urine. Where did we see adrenaline before? We saw adrenaline in a body's response to stress for short-term stressors, where adrenaline is released from the adrenal medulla. Yeah, so we know that adrenaline, having those high levels, will affect maybe the functioning of the white blood cells of our immune systems. Um, they also find that the Sawyers, the high risk group, had high levels of stress hormones on work than rest days. So, for example, if you think of Saturday and Sundays are rest days, they found that when come Monday, the hormones increased because it was a work day. So, obviously, a huge issue going on there. And the problem for this one, so this is kind of like opposite or an undermined Marmot's original research, where they found no correlation between workload and illness, where these people actually did find a correlation between workload, so having to do too much and having too much responsibility and illness. So it kind of contradicts it in a way. Obviously, population validity, it was in Sweden, so that could be a problem between London and Sweden. And naturalistic settings, so the thing about minimizes demand characteristics. So because they're in a natural setting, they didn't think, or they weren't in a laboratory setting, so they were acting as normally as they would do. So that is a strength because they're not lying about their behavior or not doing certain things wrong because they know somebody's watching them. So that could have been that could be a nice key strength as well. Okay, so we finished off with lecture 5. Join me for lecture 5A when we look at typical examination questions for workplace stresses.